Well, hello, and welcome to Fearless Authenticity with me, Jeanne Sparrow. This is my podcast about finding our successes in who we truly are. This is about having conversations with people who know what that looks like, what that feels like, and what they had to do to get there, in the hopes that it inspires you to live your dreams fully, engage with the world as you were meant to serve in a way that makes you feel amazing. And I hope this gets deep, as I always say, because that's where we find the good stuff. But don't get it twisted. It is also about the fun of life, because if it ain't fun, it ain't worth doing. So let's be brave, be free, be you together. Now, my guest today is an author who tells hopeful stories about complicated families and complex friendships, incorporating the people, the traditions, and the food that anchor her to her roots in the South. She's also a physician with a passion and commitment to individual and community-based approaches to health equity. She's my Louisiana homegirl, a native of the West Bank of New Orleans who now calls Atlanta home. A story from her first book, Beautiful Complicated Family, a collection of flash fiction, was nominated for a Best of the Net anthology, and now she has written her first novel, The Gardins of Edin, the story of 4 Southern women loosely inspired by beloved women of the Bible that picks up where their stories in the Bible left off. I am honored, pleased, and so happy to welcome Rosey Lee to the Fearless Authenticity podcast. Hey girl, hey!
Hi, that made me so happy. Thank you.
Does it feel good to say that your book is out, that you have this novel and it's done and it will be in people's hands?
It does. It's very surreal. And I think because the lead up is all a bunch of kind of wait and then hurry up and speed up, the last few months have been really hectic. So it's like opportunities like this really get me excited, because it's like, wait, what's happening? Because you're just
real.
so busy in the lead up that you often just don't feel it every day.
Right.
So thank you. This is so
You're
much
welcome.
fun.
Thank you for doing it. Let's talk about your book first, and your writing in general, and how it's a reflection of who you are, where you come from, what you believe, because it also feels to me like it's a statement, maybe even, or an extension of your identity, your faith, your entire being.
Absolutely. I would say it is an extension. Even when I heard you say statement, I'm like, well, I didn't try to make a statement. But I think, to the point, and the whole point of this podcast, if you're living in an authentic way, you are making a statement. And, just with being on a podcast with such an important title comes with some pressure, because I'm like, how authentic am I being? But then as I really thought about it, I'm like, when I think about my story and how I got here, I'm like, okay, it makes sense. I'll just show up and we'll just talk and we'll just go from there. And hopefully it all just comes out in the wash.
Let's talk about that story, because you have taken some, if anybody listened to the intro, they know that you've taken some turns, because in one of your bios, it says that you dreamed of a career in writing, fashion design, and acting. But you are also a physician, and it seems like that came first.
Right.
So how did you shift back to those original childhood dreams? Did you know, that, did it become obvious that was the path for you to get back to?
So, I like to say, well, because I write using a pen name, I like to say that my alter ego is a physician, because there are no certifying bodies or medical schools who know who Rosey Lee is. Yeah, growing up, I wanted to be a fashion designer and an actress. And so I was always very creative. I went to I'm a graduate of Xavier University. And so in the summers during high school, I went to what they call pipeline programs. So I didn't know what that meant back then. It just meant before the summer before biology, we went to a program called BioStar, and subsequently ChemStar, et cetera. And so I was secretly being programmed to be a physician. But I wanted to be a fashion designer and an actress since I was a small child. And though my parents deny it at this point in my life, they told me the summer before I started my senior year of high school, they said, no, you can't be a fashion designer. You need to do something else. You know how parents can be. They wanted me to do something more reliable and dependable and all those things. And really their words were, you're too smart to be a fashion designer, which hopefully they won't hear this, but yeah, that's what they said. And I thought, well, when I think about what it takes to be a successful fashion designer, it takes a lot of smarts. But I know that what they meant was that, hey, you're really intelligent. We want you to do something that we place this intelligence value on. And certainly in our communities, there is a certain cachet around people who go to medical school and become physicians. My thought is I'm just still the same person. And so for me, I always kind of knew that writing would still be a part of my life, but going through the medical school process and learning more about ways to communicate with people and educate them about health, I thought, well, hey, wouldn't it be cool to kind of write some stories that have health topics and health themes and issues in it? Because when I saw stories like that on television and in books, I remembered things and I said, hey, I can use my creativity in that way.
That's amazing that you took something that was ultimately what other people wanted you to do and still found your way of doing it. At what point, though, did you say, I need to shift fully into my dreams of what I wanted to do and say, and make that transition? Like, clearly there was some expectation and encouragement on one hand, and some of that doesn't feel as intentional on your part. But then how do you say, I'm getting out of what I should be doing into what is in alignment with my purpose?
So when I finished residency, I took a job at a medical school, and I thought that I would have time to write during summer vacations, holiday breaks, weekends, evenings, etc. What I found was that I actually needed that time to work on the academic writing that was important for me to advance in my career. And so I just kept trying, and I would use, vacations and other times and kind of write in spurts. And essentially what happened is that I didn't get promoted at the point in time that I know that I should have been promoted. And I said, you know what? I spend a lot of time doing things that my boss wants me to do, and I'm not investing investing my time in the things that I really want to do. So because, doors had opened for me, I'd actually started doing some consulting work while I was working at the school and had approval to do it and all of that. And so I planned to transition from doing community-based health work at an academic institution to consulting later in life. And so because these opportunities had opened up for me, I had a platform to go ahead and actually resign from my position and start a community health consulting company. And so being my own boss allowed me to make my own schedule to decide what types of things I want to spend my time doing. And along with that, I knew that I would be able to carve out time to write. Now, that didn't happen immediately. It took me about 4 years. But also during that time, I wasn't quite sure what this novel was supposed to be about. So it also gave me time to figure that out. So again, I really believe that things work out when you are focused on the right things, and just with my religious beliefs and my spiritual beliefs, when you're focused on God, and really listening to the things that you're supposed to listen to, because sometimes something that feels like a closed door is really just an opening that will reveal itself to you later.
I want to talk about that a little bit more, because as you were telling that story, all I could hear in my head is this was ordained, right? These steps were ordered. And I think about that saying that goes, what's for you cannot miss you.
Absolutely.
No matter what choices you make. And that's exactly what it sounds like, that even though you took this circuitous route to get to where you are, it sounds like it's also setting you up for success. Can you talk about how you see your path being ordered for yourself, and how you either participated in it or fought it or was unaware of it? Because I think we can be any number of those things, even if we are praying people and paying attention. We can get distracted and not even know what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just say 100%, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. So as much as I really, really, really wanted to be a fashion designer, what I've realized is, for whatever reason, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Because I never wanted to be a physician. Like, when I tell you, I literally like had this conversation with my parents one day in the summer, and they're like, yeah, you can't do that. I'm like, wait, like, y'all realize we've been talking about this for years. So now I got to make a decision suddenly. But I thought, I've always wondered, how I could be helpful to help people, in my family and my church community know more about health. So I guess I'll go figure out how to do that. And when I think about where I am now, it's like, yeah, it's exactly where I was supposed to be, largely because I love this so much, especially one thing I've noticed about my life, sometimes people say, like, how do you know it's God talking to you? Like, what does that sound like? For me, when there's a deviation from something I really, really wanted to do, or something I really didn't want to do, and now I know I have to do it, that's always God. And so I can't answer that question for anybody else, but I can tell you time and time again, tested, it's tried and true. That's something for me. So this is where I was supposed to be. And I'm really happy about it. And so one thing about this process of launching my book, that it's shown me, is that all these skills and interests and loves that I've had over the years have just come together nicely. It's like I was just really prepared for this. I mean, everything from running for student government and helping people with wedding planning, the whole DIY. I mean, really, like, this background, like, it's foam flowers that I put together, and like, most people are like, I've actually had people say, like, you're a doctor and you do all this. I'm like, yeah, because I didn't want to be a doctor at first. Like, I spent all of my life doing creative things. So yeah, I see foam flowers and I'm like, oh, how many different ways can I use that for my book launch? And that's what I do. So I have a fun background for this interview. So yeah.
And I love it, because that's the first thing I said before we started recording. I love how you tied all those things together. But another thing that I know about you, and I guess I should disclose at this moment, that we know each other because we share an agent, and we met when you were in your agent process. And I've told you this personally before, that one thing I really admire about you is your intentionality, how you enter into partnership, how you question things, how you what you're looking for, and how you know what you're looking for. How did you come to be able to do that? And how does that play into your creative process and maybe your work in general? Because it sounds like it may have also applied to your entrepreneurial life as a consultant as well, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's a survival mechanism, right? I mean, when you think about just how we each got to this place, it's because of survival techniques and survival just intuitions that our ancestors had. The phrase, we are our ancestors' wildest dreams, like, it's true. Like, we live that out every day. And so, like, I frequently think, like, okay, like, my father picked cotton. Now, he's also college educated, homeowner, all those things. But as a small child, he was not enslaved, but growing up in rural Louisiana, he picked cotton. And so how did he get from that path to where he is now, and to having a child who's here talking to you? And so even though I don't have those same struggles, one thing I think about is, how can I still use all those traits to bring the next generation of my family closer to this place that I think we should be? And so I think we all have opportunities every day. And I'll be honest, I didn't start thinking about that way, but I think my parents just kind of programmed me to just always do the best, always look for things, and just, going through some things in childhood, and you're like, wow, like, is this really what's happening? So how do I get out of this? And so I think if you apply those things, in your everyday life, it works out. And so even when I think about just the professional skills that we have in our lives, if we apply those to things that are our passions, then, that's how lots of people form, like, multi-million-dollar companies from a hobby, right? To me, it's all the same thing.
What's interesting to me is the different parallels, because my mother picked cotton as a small child when she was growing, and a young adult too, when she was growing up in North Louisiana, and then moved down to South Louisiana, married my dad. But in the same way, we talk a lot about generational trauma. We forget about the generational gifts. And I think that's what you're talking about there, is that the things that may hold us back, we may have inherited in some way or been passed that on, but we are also, the recipients of those same gifts, and how we move that forward is really interesting to me. So let's talk about challenges, setbacks, failures, because as artists, creatives, and as entrepreneurs, those are our learning opportunities. What do you think have been your biggest challenges so far in any of your experience? Because you can pick from whatever you want. And what did you learn about the bounce back from that? Like, do you have a system for, okay, this didn't work out, let me shift and learn from it? And do you have a system for that, what some entrepreneurs call failing forward now?
Sure. I think for me, probably my biggest challenge, and one that I still deal with like daily, is people putting me in a box. It's a theme that, it's funny. Like, if I had read that question on a piece of paper, it wouldn't have occurred to me. But when I think about just even again, the things that I've gone through with launching this book, I'm like, are people really still putting me in a box? Like, why? Have I not shown people that, like, I don't read the manual? Actually, no, I do read the manual and I know the rules. I just pick which rules I follow. And also that people who are innovators, they're innovators because nobody's done it that way before. So why are these people giving me a hard time? So it's that at like every level of my life. I get frustrated by it, but it's one of those things, like, I figured out probably, I don't know, several years ago, that it's not like, I used to feel like it was like a cloud over my head, like in the cartoons where there's the person just walking with the cloud. It's not. It is kind of a theme of my life that I'm gonna have to work through, and then I think I'm done. But then, like, you get like the advanced curriculum of that test, and so it's like, okay, well, that's my test in life. Then what? I've got to look at this, like, instead of being just beat down by it, how can I outsmart this test again? Because outsmarting it gets me, it's almost like a video game. It gets me to like that next level and that next level and that next level. And I feel like I'm getting closer and closer and closer to where I'm really supposed to be. And that's how you like win the prize of the video game, right? But only it's not a prize. It's not a game. It's like real life.
I love it. I love it. My therapist often says we are here to learn something very particular in life, in the same way that we are here to do something very particular in life, and our purpose. Like, I've always believed that each of us have this thing to do, but I never thought about the flip side of it. But that's what you just described, is like, if these things keep coming up over and over again, it's like getting this expertise, if you will, in the way that we live and the way that we move. When I say the words fearless authenticity to you, what comes to mind first?
Really just being yourself, especially when you live in a world where people are always, again, trying to put you in a box. So no, I'm going to just be me. And that doesn't happen overnight. Like, it's taken me all of my life to really get to this point the last couple of years where I am fine doing that. Like it or love it. Like, this is just who I am. And people can just, again, like it or love it or not. It's fine.
The thing I find interesting, I get this question a lot when I'm speaking, and then we do Q&A at the end. It's like, well, how do I find myself? Because I think so many of us listen to all of the things that we're told from the time we're young about how we should use our intelligence, how we should use our creativity. And those shoulds can kind of get into the way of our natural inclinations and things like that. What was your a method of discovery of who Rosey Lee is?
That's such a great question. So I think it just happens. I think as life challenges you and you ask yourself, who do I want to be, even though this happened to me? Who do I want to be if this doesn't happen the way that I want it to happen? And I think so often, at least me, I don't know if everyone else's brain works out. Like, we have this ideal, like, I'm a recovering perfectionist, right? So I have this ideal in my head of what I want to happen. And I'm one of those people who's just wired to go after it. And so for me, what I realized is, like, I just want to be comfortable in the world and my skin. And part of for me, being a recovering perfectionist is also being a recovering people pleaser. So for me, all these things are tied in. And so, yeah, I want people to be happy. Part of, my life of service, again, because of my faith, it, has to do with, to some extent, there's some alignment with people pleasing, but not really. And so teasing that out, and what does that mean? And having a good therapist to help you also navigate through that, right? Because, I'll say, and there are themes in my debut novel about cardiovascular health, mental health, and the connection between them. People, don't mind frequently talking about physical health, but we don't always want to talk about mental health. Well, why not? As someone whose alter ego is trained in primary care and preventive medicine and internal medicine, I wholeheartedly believe that having a therapist is just as essential as having a primary care physician. So really, for me, this life of service is about helping to make those connections for people too. And wanting my life to be an example as much as possible that, hey, like I've gone through this, let me just kind of tell you so you don't have to go through this hard path. Or at least if you choose that hard path, at least here's some tools for you in case you decide you want to use them at some point. That type of sharing is really important for me too.
Okay, girl, there's so many directions I could go from with that particular answer, because you said one of my magic words. We've talked about this before, but service is one of my magic words. How do you see your using your gifts in service of others without getting into the people pleasing? Like, I want to dive deeper into that, because I think, and especially for us as women, especially for us as Black women, and I would even go further and say, especially as Black Southern women, that we are kind of reared to be that, right?
Absolutely.
Like, service is part of our lives, but service to what degree? Right. And I do think we are here to be here for each other. Like, one of the things I think people often, when I talk about fearless authenticity, that I have to remind people is like, no, this is not about rampant individuality. This is about using ourselves in service of each other, because we are nothing without our communities, but we have to be who we are for those puzzle pieces to fit. So how do you see service without people pleasing? How do you see using your best gifts in community?
So there are two things that come to mind as I heard you, or that came to mind as I heard you ask that question. The first thing was that my sister said to me just real casually one day that she just sees me as a teacher. And I went, that's interesting, because she's 100% right. But I hadn't thought about it that way. Like, I was the kid who played school during recess. Like, I literally did that with my friends. So I was like, yeah, I can't argue with her on that. And then even, again, with my alter ego being a physician, after residency, what did I do? I went and taught at a medical school. So much of and I'm the oldest of my siblings. And so being the oldest, there comes a responsibility. Show your brother how to do this. Show your little cousin how to do this. So yes, that's all a part of it. So for me, it's, yes, I can help. I can show you what I know. I can hopefully teach you how to learn from my experience, or at least give you the tools to do that. And that's also, again, very much the way my alter ego approaches patient care also, and health education. But also within that, the teacher has to take care of herself, right? And so the second thing that came to mind as I heard your question is, for those of us who enjoy traveling, they always tell you, put on your own mask before you put on someone else's. So for me, that's that second piece. And so for me, I didn't just one day wake up and decide, oh, people pleasing is a problem. What I realized is I don't like the way I feel when I'm thinking about these things. Why am I choosing their feelings over mine? I don't like the way I feel after I do that. I don't like the way I feel when they make a decision that doesn't honor the sacrifice that I've given. So I need to figure out how to fix that so I don't feel that way. And that helped me to kind of back out of that. But then I have to apply that more broadly to my life, right? So that's how it ties in for me with that piece of service. Because otherwise you'll totally wear yourself out just serving everybody else. You'll be exhausted. And guess what? You'll die and the world will just go on.
Indeed.
And we don't want that.
That's the other thing I focus on is self-care, right? What do you do to care of yourself and your gifts?
So let me just say, I talk a lot about self-care, and I tell people one reason I talk about it is because I am a work in progress. Vacation is one of my favorite things. Rest. I really, really need 8 hours of sleep a night. I don't always get it. I frequently don't get it, but I know that I'm an 8 hours per sleep person. And when I am well rested, like I am closer to being my best self. Can I function on 7 hours? I can. But even if I got like 7 hours for 3 weeks, I don't feel my best. I can do a few spurts of 6 hours or 4 hours or 2 hours, but I need to get back. Like if I can get 8 hours the rest of the week, like I'm fine, So really knowing to get rest, but also not just rest, but also what are the fun things that energize me, right? Like that's something else I learned in therapy. I used to think about rest and vacation just as relaxation. But we do need to do like fun things, and it really stimulates your thinking. So listening to music, really just even having like a music break at home can really just put a burst of energy into my day. I'm still working on the part where like exercise gives me energy. I have gotten the endorphin high a few times, but I'm not one of those people. But knowing that like integrating exercise into my life keeps me more at that place where when I'm sleeping well, when I'm like moving well, and not necessarily like always going to an exercise class, but staying active and taking walks and doing those active things, like that's what really allows me to really experience that self-care high, but also like days at the spa, because who doesn't love like a 1 or 2 hour long massage? Like, yes.
I'm right there with you. You're speaking my language. You're talking about, because pampering is a part of self-care. It is not the totality of it, but it is definitely part of it. And how does that play out in your debut novel? Like, because you're telling our stories as women, and from the perspective of stories that anybody who grew up around the Bible have heard before. So how does that work? And how does all these things that are Rosey Lee, how is that poured into the Gardins of Edin?
So I appreciate that question, because I think there are people in my family who are like, is she like talking directly about us in this book? And the answer is no. But obviously, most fiction writers will tell you that their lives and the things that are important to them come out in their writing. So my characters are struggling with intergenerational conflict. How do we respect the matriarch of our family, but communicate with her that like, hey, you have breached the terms of our relationship contract. Like, you and I used to roll like this, but now some things are changing in your life. And what about me? How do these things impact me? But then also that matriarch is thinking, hey, I put my life on hold for so many years because I've been taking care of this family. But when do I make it about myself? And that those two women's feelings are both reasonable and appropriate, but how do we navigate through those things? So navigating through that type of intergenerational conflict, but also, prioritizing yourself in terms of how long do I want to stay in this family of people who are not making me feel very welcome? Because sometimes we have to make decisions about how we navigate through our families of origin. And in my book, we've got Ruth, who, in the Bible, married into Naomi's family once. Her husband died, and then she marries one of his cousins, right? And so, I wrote this book set in present day because, that made sense back in those days. But in present day, some folks would be looking like, we don't know about you marrying two cousins, especially because our family has money.
But it happens.
But it happens. And so I said, I want to deal with this within this construct of this family, but in present day. And how does this particular family navigate through it? Because some families are fine with it, but others, it makes for great TV, right? And so I wrote this book about it. And so in this story, because I always wondered just reading the Bible, because like my thoughts, I just reading the Bible, doing Sunday school. I had Sunday school teachers when I was growing up who made you feel like these Bible characters were just like you. And so, after hearing the story year after year after year, I'm like, why did Ruth leave her family? What's up with her family? So I always wondered. So I made it up, right? So why did Ruth leave her family. And of course, I made her family like this chaotic situation. So she leaves one chaotic situation, goes into this dream family, but guess what? There's chaos there too.
So it looked good from the outside.
It looked good from the outside. But how does she navigate through that? And does she come to a point where she says, should I stay in this family? So in my book, she does. And so, because I thought, in present day, we hear so many stories and we go through so many things on our own with our families of origin. And sometimes we explore the concept of found family in our own lives by building either a totally new family or having like a family of friends and aunties and godparents that we create because we're not getting the love and support that we want in our families of origins, or because, for whatever reason, our family of origin no longer exists in this world. And so I wanted a character who would navigate through that and really ask herself some difficult questions. And so it was a lot of fun to write. And I think to some, again, it's not autobiographical, but it did help me to realize that there are just seeds of things that I experienced in my own family and seen through friends. And I just wanted to explore some of those themes and just kind of see where it led me.
I can't wait to finish it and see where it all goes.
Thank you.
Because the thing about stories, especially in the Bible, because they are meant to teach us lessons in those parables. But then you're like, if you get attached to the characters, you're like, well, wait a minute, what happened after that? It's like, that's the reason why book series are so special, So I'm hoping that there's more to come.
I appreciate that. I hope so too. I'll just say that. Stay tuned.
So tell me, what is the best piece of advice that you have ever received and or given?
Follow your heart. Follow your heart. And I sometimes feel a little bit of pause before I say that, because sometimes the heart can lead you wrong, right? But I think if you listen, you know who you are. You know where it is that you want to go, but sometimes fear steps in and tells you, no, go this way. Or sometimes you'll say, oh, I just want to roll the dice. When I feel that way, that's usually not the way I'm supposed to go. And so sometimes it's fun, but it's not the way I'm supposed to go. And I usually have to, kind of back out of that a bit later. But really follow your heart, because if you know yourself, if you know what you want, if you know what you value, your heart will show you what the right decision is for you.
The value piece. And if you know your own value as well, that's another thing I end up talking about quite a bit in my work, because I don't know that all of us are trained to see our value, much less know how to share it with other people. And fear definitely gets in the way of that, because fear talks so loudly. And sometimes your heart whispers.
Yeah.
And
I appreciate that you said that, because I think it can be easy to hear what I just said and say, and just see the end point of that. But frequently, as you mentioned, the question is, but how do I get there? It's, when you have that moment and you're like, again, you don't like the way it felt, then you ask yourself, what didn't I like about that? That's your heart speaking to you. Like you said, that's your heart saying something. It's just tugging. So then you stop. What didn't I like about that? And what do I need to explore to figure out for that thing not to happen again? And for me, that's just taking one step, right? But if you take it one step at a time and you take 20 steps, then you look back, you're like, wow, how did I get that far? And then that 20 steps turns into 2 blocks. And that 2 blocks turns into a mile, and so on and so on. And then you realize, wow, this is how I ended up in this place. Because it doesn't happen overnight. No.
It never does. And even when it looks like it happened overnight, there's so much preparation that goes into it that I think we romanticize. And that's part of the reason why I do this podcast is to break that down, because it's hard to encapsulate how you get somewhere, because sometimes you forget how you even got where you are. And then you have to go and like you said, you have to unlock the next level of the lesson, because you got to remind your damn self.
It's so true.
All right, I'm moving into my last couple of questions that I always ask everybody. But before I get to those, I want to know, what books are you reading? What are the books that have inspired you the most?
So I have to say, reading Waiting to Exhale is what made me want to be a writer. I remember just tearing through it in like a day or a weekend or something and saying, I want to write stories like this. Because, I didn't grow up in a family where everyone read a lot of books. But when my mom and my aunts were reading that book, and I said, I want to write books that people who don't always read books want to read. And so that's certainly one of them. And then also, I love poetry. So the writing of Dr. Maya Angelou and Nikki Giovanni, very inspiring to me. So right now I'm reading a book by a friend, actually. It's called Dysfunction Junction by Robin W. Pearson. It's also about a Black Southern family with secrets. And she and I marvel at how there are similarities between our books, similar themes, but we had no idea that each other were actually working on those books. So that's something I'm looking forward to hearing people experience, hopefully after reading my book.
I love it. And I love that there is a lineage there in what you're talking about, because we can see how our chosen ancestors also speak through us and continue that as well.
Absolutely.
So what is your proudest achievement so far? This is a two-parter. What's your proudest achievement so far, and what do you still dream of doing?
Sure. So I think just being happy with myself. Again, as someone who is a people pleaser in recovery, learning that balance between, hey, I want the people I love and care about to be happy in life, but learning how to accept that it's okay if they're not happy with me right now. And it's okay if they don't become happy with me. But just being comfortable in that, and choosing myself. For me, that's probably that is my greatest accomplishment. And what do I want to do more? That was the question, right?
What do you still dream of doing?
For me, I think it's really just continuing to prepare the way for other generations. So I've got really for the kids in my family, right? I have a niece who's very much like me. She's like my little mini me. And so thinking about her and thinking about her sister, I want them to have more opportunities than I have. And so just introducing them to things and allowing them to experience the world with as few limits as possible. That's what I want. Because again, I feel like we are part of a chain. And when I think about the sacrifices that my grandparents made for my parents and the sacrifices that my parents made for me, I feel like that's certainly my next step.
I love it. And then my final question, when do you feel you are at your best, truest, most authentic expression of you?
For me, it's when I'm home. And so I'll say, when I'm on the West Bank, and I have to be specific like that, because that is, it's home, it's me. And even on my most recent trip, just a couple weeks ago, I was kind of dealing with something frustrating, but I just felt like I am the me that I've always been, but on an elevated level, because I've healed from things. I'm still growing through things. I'm still dealing with some challenges that I thought I wouldn't still be dealing with, but I'm happy with myself. And I felt like I really am being myself. I'm not putting on some facade when I have to tell somebody something difficult, or when I surprise them by telling them, giving them grace when they've done something to irritate me. Just that feeling, it just being at home just makes me, it just encapsulates all of that for me. And it's not saying that I'm any less authentic when I'm in Atlanta, but home is home. And when you have a place where you feel like you can just be yourself and there are people there who you trust and who you can be yourself with, that's just really, really a beautiful thing.
Oh, I'd love that. Thank you so much for sharing The best of luck to you with the Gardens of Edin. I'm seeing it on the big screen, me personally.
Thank you.
I'm speaking that into the universe. Even though you didn't say it, I'm like, they call stories biblical for a reason. Okay.
I appreciate that so much. And obviously I would love that. So if you're watching or listening, call me.
Do that.
Yes.
Thank you, my love.
Thank you so much. It has been such a joy to talk with you. Just absolutely joyful. Thank you.
Oh, Miss Rosey, thank you so much for your wisdom and showing us a path that connects heart and mind and how to navigate our dreams, no matter how twisty, turny the road is, navigating our dreams into reality. Because a lot of times they stay just dreams because we can't see the path. And I love how you showed us how you found yours. Some of the things that I really took away from this conversation, the lessons for recovering perfectionists and recovering people pleaser, and how those two things can often be connected, and how sometimes it's the same answer to recover from both of them, finding our boundaries so we can learn to balance choosing ourselves and also at the same time truly living a life of service and what that means. And I talk about this a lot, and it seems to be a theme so far this season. It's so important to be authentically ourselves, but it's not separated from the concept of community. You know, it's not the individual over community. It's about us being ourselves so that we can be in true community with other people. And that's what I think Rosey was getting at. She also affirmed for me about how we follow the rules that we understand and believe in and leave the rest alone and not let others put us into a box just because that's how they conceive things and how they see things working out. We don't have to accept that at all. We need to understand what the rules are and then pick and choose the ones that apply to us, always asking why. Why is it this way? Because a lot of times we assume things have to be a certain way when they don't necessarily need to. And finally, I love how she defines what it means and how to follow our hearts. You know, a lot of times we don't always trust our hearts, but understanding that it's about sidestepping fear, not taking shortcuts, recognizing the temptations of fun and what moment it becomes an abdication of our purpose and what we're really supposed to be doing. And that when it comes down to it, it's about knowing what we value and knowing our values so that our heart can truly be free to show us what the right decision and path is for us and not for anybody else. Thank you so much, Rosey, for your time, your clarity, your intentionality, and don't miss out on her novel. Please pick up The Gardens of Edin. It is out now in bookstores and online. I really appreciate you, my Fearless Authenticity listeners, for your attention, for your support. You know I wouldn't do this without you, and I could not do it without my amazing production team, Jess, Vicky, Lisa E, Wayne. I appreciate your hard work every single week. Now, you know, we love to get interaction from you, and it also helps expand our reach and helps us make an impact. So please rate, review, comment, download, share, subscribe, whatever you choose to do with this episode, every single place that you get your podcast, including on YouTube. We welcome that everywhere it is. And leave us your comments too if you have any suggestions or things that you want to talk about. I'd also be honored if you join my community. You can sign up for my newsletter at fearlessauthenticity.com. Follow me on social media at Ms. Jeanne Sparrow. That's where you can watch this podcast on YouTube. Also, you'll find me on Facebook and TikTok at that handle. My handle on Instagram and Twitter is at JM Sparrow. And I am planning to roll out some exclusive content this spring, both from the pod, behind the scenes, and some other interactive stuff that I'm really excited about. Please stay tuned for details on that and keep an eye out for it on both social and my newsletter, wherever it is that you interact with my community. This has been Fearless Authenticity with Jeanne Sparrow. Thank you so much for listening. See you again soon.